in the quiet streets of occupied Europe in 1943, where every shadow could hide a soldier, every creaking floorboard could mean death, and every whispered word could betray a lifetime of courage. A girl no older than 17 pedaled furiously on her bicycle through the rubble-strewn alleys, her heart hammering in her chest as if trying to escape before her body could follow. And though the world dismissed her as just a girl, was completely unaware of the lethal intellect and courage she carried in every calculated movement. She was about to prove that the underestimated often wield the deadliest power. For her mission was impossible by every measure, infiltrating German supply lines, disrupting troop movements, and leaving chaos in the wake of soldiers who believed they ruled the streets with unquestioned authority. And as she maneuvered her bicycle with the precision of a seasoned operative, weaving between abandoned carts and toppled street lamps, the stakes could not have been higher, because a single wrong turn, a single glance from an enemy patrol, or a slip on the icy cobblestones could end not just her life, but the lives of dozens of partisans and civilians counting on her daring. And yet she moved with a terrifying calm, her mind a machine of strategy and instinct, calculating distances, timing patrol patterns, memorizing every soldier's face she had ever seen, every guard rotation. And with each passing intersection she realized that her mission was more than a series of daring maneuvers. It was a testament to the defiance of youth against a monstrous war machine. And she carried in her bag not weapons of fire, but intelligence. Maps, coded messages, and subtle instruments of sabotage. Each one a tool of life or death in the hands of the unwitting enemy. And the suspense of that night was almost unbearable. As the chilling question loomed over every breath she took, could a single girl, armed only with courage, cunning, and a bicycle, actually outwit a well-trained army? And if she failed, how many innocent lives would be crushed beneath the iron wheels of occupation? For she had learned the hard truth of war at an age when most girls worried about dances and school exams, that survival and resistance demanded audacity beyond imagination. And as she approached the German checkpoint, her eyes scanning for the slightest hint of danger, her hands trembling only with controlled anticipation, she felt the weight of an entire city on her shoulders, the hopes of a hidden network of resistance fighters, and the lives of civilians depending on her every decision in this moment. Frozen in a quiet street illuminated by the dim light of a broken lamppost was the point where courage and insanity merged, where the world that underestimated her would soon discover that power often comes in the smallest, most overlooked forms, and that sometimes the most lethal weapon is a mind that refuses to obey fear, a heart that refuses to break, and a girl on a bicycle who refused to be dismissed. And as she pedaled faster into the darkened avenues, ducking behind crates, slipping through shadows, the unthinkable began to unfold, and the world that had laughed at her underestimated the fury and brilliance of her actions, setting in motion a series of events that would bewilder enemy officers, save countless lives, and etch her name, though invisible for decades, into the secret annals of war where courage alone could rewrite destiny. As the night deepened and the city streets grew quieter under the oppressive silence of occupation, she continued weaving through narrow alleys, her bicycle tires whispering against the cobblestones, every shadow a potential threat, every distant footstep a possible end. And yet, the girl moved with a precision that seemed impossible for someone so young, memorizing the cadence of German patrols, predicting their turns before they made them, and exploiting the smallest gaps between sentries to slip past checkpoints, all while carrying intelligence that could alter the fate of resistance cells and civilians alike. And she understood that even a fraction of a second's hesitation could cost lives. So her mind operated like a machine, nanalyzing, predicting, calculating, balancing speed, distance, and timing with the kind of clarity born only from necessity. And as she passed a street corner, a squad of soldiers came into view, their boots echoing ominously against the empty buildings, rifles slung casually over their shoulders, unaware that this little girl they had laughed at moments before was about to disrupt their plans. And she adjusted her route in a heartbeat, circling behind debris piles and abandoned carts, concealing herself with the fluidity of smoke, and with each successful evasion her confidence grew. But the danger only intensified because German intelligence was beginning to notice patterns. Strange disruptions in supply lines, missing orders, delays in troop movements, all seemingly minor, but enough to trigger suspicion, and she knew that sooner or later, someone would trace these anomalies back to their source. Meaning that one day, one mistake, even the tiniest, could unravel everything she had worked for, and yet she could not stop. Because the lives she protected were counting on her courage. The people whose names she carried in her satchel were more than numbers. They were children, families, entire communities whose survival depended on her daring. And as she pedaled toward the outskirts of the city, she began a series of maneuvers that required every ounce of her focus, dodging street barricades, signaling to hidden allies who silently cleared paths, exchanging folded notes under the noses of patrolling soldiers, and dropping coded messages into pre-arranged locations. All actions that were invisible to the untrained eye, but critical in maintaining the chain of survival. And in the midst of this, she faced an unexpected complication, a checkpoint that had been altered. More heavily guarded than before, suspiciously quiet yet ominous. As if the enemy sensed the anomaly she represented, and she knew that the only way through was to merge ingenuity with audacity. Timing her passage between inspection intervals, keeping her head low, body still, eyes sharp, and heart beating in perfect rhythm with the wheels beneath her. And as she passed the final soldier, almost touching his boot with the tip of her tire, she felt a surge of adrenaline, not because she was young or fearless, but because she understood that fear is a tool, to be controlled and harnessed. And in that instant, the difference between life and death, victory and disaster, hung on her ability to stay invisible yet decisive. And this moment of success was not the end, it was only the beginning of a larger, more intricate plan to intercept and sabotage German troop movements using her mobility, cunning, and ability to blend into the urban environment. And every turn she took, every shadow she used as cover, every note she passed, contributed to a ripple effect that disrupted enemy operations in ways the soldiers themselves could not anticipate. And the thought that she was accomplishing all this while the world dismissed her as just a girl added a silent thrill. A quiet defiance, because history often underestimates the underestimated. And in her case, that underestimation was her greatest weapon, allowing her to move freely, strike effectively, and inspire those around her who, like her, dared to resist even when the odds seemed impossible. And as the night stretched on, her route became a dance of danger and precision, a testament to how courage, intelligence, and a bicycle could reshape the battlefield without a single shot fired. And as dawn approached, she vanished into the shadows, leaving behind the chaos she had orchestrated, an invisible signature of resistance, a puzzle the enemy would spend weeks trying to solve. And the city awoke to the reality that a young girl had quietly altered the course of operations. Her audacity a silent testament to the power of one determined individual against the machinery of war, even as the first pale light of dawn touched the shattered rooftops of the city, casting long, eerie shadows across the rubble-strewn streets. She did not pause, knowing that the smallest lapse in vigilance could undo hours of meticulous planning. And as she threaded her bicycle through narrow alleyways, ducking beneath hanging laundry and weaving around toppled carts, the weight of responsibility pressed down like an invisible hand. Every life she had touched, every civilian whose name she carried, a silent burden demanding perfection. And the city itself seemed to hold its breath, the usual morning noises muted, as if the war itself had paused to watch her movements. And with each pedal stroke, she executed a precise choreography of survival. Dodging patrols, slipping behind barricades, and communicating with hidden allies using subtle signals only they would recognize, all while carrying forged orders, critical intelligence, and coded messages that could alter troop deployments, supply lines, and ultimately the lives of dozens, if not hundreds, of families depending on her speed and ingenuity. And yet, danger loomed larger than ever because German officers were beginning to notice irregularities, delays, and missing personnel reports, and though they could not yet pinpoint the source, Their growing suspicion meant that her window of opportunity was shrinking, forcing her to think faster, move smarter, and act more audaciously than she ever had before. And as she approached a central supply depot, one of the most heavily patrolled locations in the occupied city, she recognized that this would be the ultimate test of her skill. Courage and wit, for here a single misstep would mean capture, torture, and certain death, not only for herself, but potentially for the entire network she had been helping to sustain. And she did something that no one would expect. Instead of avoiding the depot, she exploited the patterns of the guards' movements, the timing of resupply trucks, and the complacency bred from routine, maneuvering her bicycle with near-inhuman precision into blind spots, weaving past sentries who laughed at the sight of a young girl on a bicycle. And in those moments of extreme tension, she felt a clarity that surpassed fear, as though every second compressed into a single decision point where life and death balanced precariously on her instincts. And with a series of carefully calculated diversions, she succeeded in placing false intelligence documents, misdirecting troop movements, and delaying shipments critical to the German war effort. Each action invisible to the untrained eye, but devastating in consequence, and the ripple effect was immediate. Officers chased phantom orders. Soldiers moved in circles, and the depot's operations descended into controlled chaos, all orchestrated by the girl they had underestimated. And she pedaled away into narrow back streets, sweating, exhausted, yet fueled by the knowledge that she had not only survived, but succeeded in an operation that could have easily ended in tragedy. And as she disappeared into the morning mist, the silent message was clear. Appearances deceive, courage manifests in unexpected forms, and the underestimated often wield the power to change the course of events. And even as enemy officers would later pore over records and question their own competence, they would never suspect that the little girl on a bicycle had been the force behind their disarray, the invisible agent of disruption whose audacity, intelligence, and relentless determination had rewritten the rules of engagement. And though her physical exertion left her trembling, her mind raced ahead to the next target, the next mission, knowing that the enemy's underestimation was both a shield and a weapon. And with each successful maneuver, her legend grew in whispered stories among the resistance, a myth that inspired others to act, to risk, to defy, proving that a single, determined individual, dismissed by all as insignificant, could wield an influence that armies feared but could not see. And as she finally paused on the outskirts of the city to catch her breath, she allowed herself the smallest smile, not from pride, but from a profound understanding that courage, intelligence, and unyielding audacity could bend the seemingly immutable structures of war, that a girl on a bicycle could disrupt a machine designed to crush the world, and that in her quiet, invisible way, she had begun to carve a legacy that history would only slowly come to understand. As the day progressed, the city began to stir with the ordinary rhythms of occupation, the clatter of boots, the distant rumble of trucks, the occasional bark of a guard's order butt for her. Nothing was ordinary, for every sound was a potential signal, every movement a possible threat, and even a simple shadow could reveal the presence of a German patrol. And yet she moved with the uncanny confidence of someone who had learned to read the heartbeat of a city under siege, using alleyways, abandoned buildings, and hidden passages to her advantage. Her bicycle not merely a means of transport, but an extension of her tactical mind, allowing her to slip through spaces too small for soldiers, to maintain momentum when time itself seemed to freeze, and as she approached another key target, a supply route critical to German troop deployments, she calculated distances, angles, and timing with such precision that her every decision seemed preordained, as if the chaos of war itself bent to her will. And she executed a series of maneuvers that included signaling allies, dropping misinformation, and creating small, controlled disturbances that would ripple through the German logistics system, each one unnoticed by those who believed the city was orderly and controlled. And as she turned a corner, narrowly avoiding a sentry who paused only inches from her path, she felt the tension tighten like a vice, knowing that one miscalculation could expose not only herself, but the entire network of resistance fighters who relied on her intelligence. And she understood that the danger was cumulative, each successful maneuver increasing enemy scrutiny, each delay or diversion creating suspicion that had to be managed carefully. And in the midst of these operations, she discovered the most critical element of her strategy: unpredictability, the ability to act in ways the enemy could never anticipate, exploiting assumptions, overconfidence, and the blind spots created by their own rigid protocols. And through this, she managed to misdirect German soldiers repeatedly, turning the patrols and checkpoints into unwitting participants in her mission. And as she navigated the final stretch toward a rendezvous point where her intelligence would be transferred to other members of the resistance, she felt the immense pressure of responsibility, the knowledge that the lives of civilians, partisans, and even children depended on the success of every single decision she had made over the previous hours. And yet, she harnessed that pressure into a force, propelling her forward with razor-sharp focus, her mind a perfect balance of fear and clarity, improvisation and precision, until at last she arrived at the drop-off point, where a small group of resistance members awaited her arrival. Each movement executed seamlessly, each piece of intelligence delivered exactly as planned. And in those fleeting moments of calm, she allowed herself to reflect, understanding that what she had accomplished in a single night disrupting troop movements, misdirecting officers, saving lives, was nothing short of miraculous. Not because of chance or luck, but because of her audacity, intellect, and unwavering determination. And though she could feel exhaustion coursing through her body, she also felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that the enemy's underestimation of a single girl on a bicycle had become her greatest weapon, that the very act of dismissal had provided her cover, and that, by using her size, youth, and apparent innocence as camouflage, she had accomplished what armies of men could not, turning the tide in small but critical ways. And as she pedaled away from the rendezvous point, disappearing into the labyrinthine streets once more, she carried with her not only the weight of ongoing missions, but the knowledge that each action had a consequence. Each choice could alter the fate of countless lives, and that the legend of the girl on a bicycle, dismissed by all, feared by none, yet lethal in her precision, was only beginning, setting the stage for greater operations, riskier maneuvers, and a legacy of courage that would echo long after the war itself faded into history. And as the sun rose over the occupied city, illuminating rooftops, smokestacks, and shattered streets, she remained a ghost, invisible to the enemy, unstoppable in her purpose, and an enduring symbol of how a single, underestimated individual could bend the machinery of war with nothing more than courage, intellect, and relentless determination, proving to the world that sometimes the smallest, quietest figures are capable of the most extraordinary acts of defiance and heroism. And as the war finally drew to a close, with the distant echoes of gunfire fading and the shattered cities slowly beginning to breathe again, the girl on the bicycle, once dismissed as just a child, emerged from the shadows of secrecy and fear to reveal the astonishing truth of her mission. A mission so audacious, so precise, and so cunning that historians would struggle for decades to fully comprehend it. For she had single-handedly disrupted troop movements, diverted German soldiers, and saved countless civilians from certain death, using nothing more than her intelligence, courage, and the underestimated power of a young girl's daring mobility. And as the Allied forces liberated towns and cities, testimonies emerged of families who survived because of her interventions, children whose lives had been spared due to her ingenious diversions, entire communities that had been rerouted to safety without the enemy ever suspecting the source. And the records she forged, the notes she passed, and the routes she memorized all became pieces of an invisible tapestry of resistance that few would ever know existed. Yet the impact was undeniable, for thousands owed their lives to her meticulous planning and fearless execution. And while she never sought recognition, never claimed medals or honors, her name quietly became a legend among the resistance, whispered with reverence, a symbol of audacity and defiance. And the final chilling truth lingered: the enemy had dismissed her, mocked her, and underestimated her simply because of her age and appearance, only to be repeatedly outmaneuvered by someone they never saw as a threat. And as modern historians uncovered fragments of her operations, the astonishing scale of her influence became clear, revealing that a single, underestimated civilian could, with courage, intelligence, and relentless determination, bend the course of events in ways entire armies could not. And the ultimate lesson of her story, the girl who became a ghost in the eyes of the enemy, yet a savior in the eyes of the innocent, is that heroism often wears an unexpected face, and that those who are overlooked may in fact wield the power to change history. And as you reflect on her courage, on the lives she saved, on the enemy she confounded, and the strategy she executed flawlessly in the face of impossible odds, you are confronted with a final haunting question that lingers in the mind long after the tale ends. If one underestimated girl on a bicycle could outwit and disrupt the deadliest army in the world, how many other invisible heroes of history shaped the outcomes of war and survival, remaining unrecognized, unseen, yet leaving legacies written not in monuments or medals, but in the very lives they preserved. And as the sun rises over a world rebuilt from ashes, the story closes not with fanfare but with awe, reverence, and the silent, unshakable truth that courage, intellect, and audacity, even in the smallest form, can bend history itself, proving forever that one underestimated individual, armed only with wit and determination, can become the difference between life and death for thousands. And the girl on the bicycle remains in memory and in legend, the ultimate testament to the power of the overlooked, the underestimated, and the audacious,